Welcome to the Next Level Human podcast. As a human, you have a job to do. In fact, you have 4 jobs: to earn and manage money, to attain and maintain health and fitness, to build and sustain personal relationships, to find meaning and make a difference. None of these jobs are taught in school, and that is what this podcast is designed to do. To educate us all on living our most fulfilled lives through the mastery of these 4 jobs. I'm your host, Dr. Jade Teta, and I believe we are here living this life for 3 reasons and 3 reasons only: to learn, to teach, and to love. In this podcast, I will be learning, teaching, and loving right along with you. I'm grateful to have your company. Here's to our next level.
Hi, Jade.
What's going on?
I have a question for you.
Okay.
What's hard about being a man?
Yeah. Okay. So, well, first, let me say before we get into this conversation, you guys might hear some noise. Emily and I are at my home in Asheville. I got some construction going on downstairs, building a sauna. So if you hear knocking and banging, that's what that is. Hopefully, it won't get too crazy. But yeah. So this is a really hard question, especially now, right?
Mm-hmm.
In the climate that we are in. And I would say it's a delicate question because on the one hand, there's a lot that's really easy about being a man. But when you say what's hard about being a man, I would say it's the expectations and assumptions that society puts on men. Now, here's the interesting thing, right? We could say the same thing about women. So I'll go a little bit more into that. But I think we usually say, because we live in this is not, I think not everyone agrees with this. This is a whole argument for another time, but I would say, this is my opinion, that we live in a male-dominated world. And how I'm making that opinion is most of our leaders are men. Most of history has been led by men, written by men. I'm in the research world. I study metabolism. Most of that stuff has been on men. So I do think we live in a male-dominated world from that perspective. At the same time, I look at it and say, okay, well, there's a lot of expectations and assumptions around what it means to be a man, and you can have 2 sides to this. And this, I think, is the problem. And I'll speak about it maybe from my point of view. So I feel like I'm a guy who looks pretty male. And when I walk around in the world, I get, sort of 2 sort of assumptions, I think, made about me. One, that I'm supposed to be more dominant, more capable, more, perhaps threatening, more, there's a power principle that is assumed about me. And on top of that, oftentimes, the assumption is also that I want and will exert that power, and that something about me, because I'm male, seeks power. And it's sort of like this thing that and that I am power and I have more privilege, and, because I'm white too, and I'm a male. And so I think what's hard about it is that I have a story as an individual. Each man has a story as an individual. Each human has a story as an individual. And I think what's hard is being lumped into a group of men, and all men are this way. Actually, I had this funny thing happen to me months back where someone tagged me in a post on a really popular female PhD figure in the world of female metabolism, and said maybe Jade Teta has like a thought on this, at Jade Teta. And the response back was basically, what could he possibly know? He's a man. Now, on the one hand, it speaks to this again. What's hard about being a man is that, because on the one hand, I see the point. On the other hand, I'm an individual, not just a man. And I have a lot of love, respect, work, hours in with working with women. And so on the one hand, I go, yes, you can throw me in that group and then dismiss me. And on the other hand, if you see me as an individual, you'll see my pain, you'll see my story, you'll see my my humanity. And so I think that's the biggest problem, is that whenever we put people in a group, we are othering them in some way, shape, or form. And by the way, I would say if we're talking about, I don't know if we're going to go in this direction, but if we're talking about equality and things like that, why would we want to, if one group, let's say, if it's true that white men have dominated, why would we want to then, to stop othering people? Why would we want to other people? See what I mean? Why would we want to fight with the same destructive viewpoint as what caused the problem in the first place? Like, rule number one of being a next level human in my mind is, you don't fight back with the same thing. You don't become the thing you hate. And so that's what I would say is the biggest problem, that the assumptions that are made about me being a man, which means I'm a member of this group, which means I'm exactly like all other men, and I should be looked at as someone who wants power, is threatening, and all of that. I think that is what's really hard, because to me, I'm unique. I'm Jade. I'm more Jade than I am a man.
Mm-hmm. I really like your answer to this. And this is a question that I've been asking many, many men for a long time now. And usually the first reaction that I often get is shock that they're even being asked the question. And then the next thing that they usually do is hesitate, because they don't want to make it seem like they immediately almost switch into comparative suffering, because most of the men I speak to are very like pro women's rights and supportive of women and equality and all of those things. And they recognize the privilege that they hold, particularly white males. And they don't want to even admit to having pain, because they recognize the pain of others. And I really want to make that point really clear as well, that oftentimes I see men as a collective almost being dismissed, because it's like, oh, well, it turns into a challenge of who has it worse. And then I will talk to women who feel like, well, we obviously have it worse because of X, Y, and Z reason. And it ignores the humanity that every single one of us possess, and our unique stories. And it's very dismissive of people's pain in a lot of ways. And I think that we have to have more of these conversations about getting to the root of this, because I work with a lot of men, and what people often forget or don't even realize is that men are 3 times more likely globally to die by suicide. Suicide is the leading cause of death for men under 35. They are more likely to die in war. They are more likely to die at work. They by far the majority of homeless people on the street. And yet there are these groups that I think are really important and needed and necessary for women's support in a variety of areas. And we still have a long way to go in that area as well. But there's very few of them for supporting men. And men also, across the board, die younger, even just in terms of overall lifespan, because of a variety of health issues. And we can go down some rabbit holes on that too. But one of the biggest things is loneliness and isolation. They do not have the social support that women do. And we know that loneliness is an enormous health factor for people, a negatively impacting health factor. And men don't know where to go. Men do not often have, even with other men, they don't even have the conversations with each other a lot of the time, much less with other people in their lives. And we have to look at some of these issues, because this is not one-sided. We have to, if we're going to approach the world with compassion and humanity and team human, as you talk about, and really trying to take a nuanced, well-rounded approach to the complexities of the human experience, we have to make men part of this conversation.
Well, first of all, I'll say something that's going to get me, I think, in trouble on both sides. And this will, you'll have to forgive me for getting a little political here just for a minute. But I think the reason why we want to have conversations like this is because, let's face it, the broader story is a story that has a narrative that essentially has 2 sides. One side saying, let's call it the conservative side, saying, men suffer, stop acting like we don't, and stop acting like this is a world where white men caused all the problems, right? And part of me goes, yeah, right? I can see that point. And then on the other side, we have, sort of the liberal side that says white men have caused all the problems and there is an equality differential here that needs to be squared. And I go, yeah, I can see that point, right? But ultimately I go, if we stay in this battle of, back and forth on these two extreme sides, all we do is miss the point of how we help people. And I'm trying to think of an analogy for this. I guess it'd be like, imagine you have, a shipyard and all these ships out in the bay. And, there's certain of these ships are these warships, and they've been around for a while and they're getting older and they're a little beat up and they've been out to battle and they've got scars and stuff. And then we got these other boats that we put all of our attention into. These other boats, we make them, they're the most pristine, they're better. These warships have dominated for so long. And these other ships we have to take care of, they're not privileged, and let's build them up and let's give them beautiful, new wood and siding and build them up. Meanwhile, the warships are crumbling and those warships have a job to do, right? So this is what I think our society is perhaps doing. On the one hand, I go, yes, these other ships that have been neglected for so long and been in the shadow of these, quote, warships need to be serviced, need to be tended to, and need to be treated equally. Let's call them not warships, but let's call them support vessels, merchant vessels that supply and do all these things and take care of us and give us food and all this stuff. But at the same time, as we're building them up, we can't neglect and just pretend like the warships are bad, like they've had no good to do in the world, and they're now crumbling, some of them sinking, and we're doing nothing about it and still saying, well, there's a problem here because the warships have been around for so long and they've been in control. I go, that just hurts all of us in the same way that it hurt all of us by neglecting the merchant ships for so long, right? And so forgive me with this perhaps silly analogy, but I feel like this is how we should be looking at this. We can't this is what society does, this back and forth ridiculousness that happens. And so from my perspective, men need to be supported, and men need to support women, and women need to support men, and men need to stop hating women, and women need to stop hating men. And we need to all just begin to say what the world that we all want to live in is not a world that is a tit for tat, eye for an eye world. That is a very base level world. Nor do I think we want to live in a world where we go, only the people with the blue shirts and pretty faces are going to be the people for the next several decades that we take care of. And then we'll pick someone else, the red shirts with the freckles. We'll pick them next. Instead of being like, let's take care of everybody, regardless of what has happened in history. This is not what next level humans do. They don't go, history was like this, therefore we have to make everything bad now. Let's just make everything good for as many people as we can. And I think this is what a lot of men are struggling with. They're struggling with this problem because they go, as an individual, I suffer. And if you get deeper into this, and I'll shut up here in just a minute, but if you get deeper into this, like here's the question I look at. Who is more privileged from the standpoint of, a white male who grew up poor in, rural Kentucky in a trailer park, who's had meth people all around them and this, that, and this, or a black male who was raised in the suburbs in Pennsylvania, who, had a mother and a father, never got involved with drugs and grew up in a good environment. I think what we have to look at and start seeing it is not male, female, necessarily black or white. It's about poverty. It's about education. It's about the fact that people do suffer. And ultimately, the reason why a lot of people on the right, the conservatives, are angry at some of the people on the left, the liberals, is because they're like, I'm a human. I suffer. And my suffering should be acknowledged regardless of the fact that I'm a male or not. In the same way that the suffering of women or people of color needs to be acknowledged. Now, this is my opinion, and I think it's something that we should pay close attention to. My opinion is that indeed, from the cultural perspective, white men have been in charge. I do think there's some degree of privilege there. However, when you really get into the philosophical debate of privilege and men, I think you have to say this is way more nuanced than what we're thinking. Like what you're saying with those statistics is you're saying a lot of these boats are sinking and a lot of them are struggling. And maybe we're not all equal yet, but we can't, destroy one group to help another. I don't know if I just went off on a tangent there or you have something to say about that, but obviously we can get into the individual stuff with men, but I want to see what you think about that. And obviously we don't have to agree, but I think this is part of what's going on with men. I do think this is what a lot of men who I don't necessarily vibe with these type of men, but I do think these are the men, this is why they're reacting the way they're reacting. And this is why certain politicians are popular, because this literally is what I think they're speaking to.
Yeah. And then on the other side of that, there are so many men who are afraid to say anything because they feel that their main job in this world, the job that has been handed to them, that has been bred into them, is to provide and protect. And that if you cannot protect or provide, you're not a real man. That is one of the core things that I hear over and over and over again. Someone, a male that I spoke to recently, even I was talking about the word vulnerability and what it means to men versus what it means to women. And I asked him what his version of what the first thing was he thought of when I said the word vulnerability. And he said a target. And I said, say more. And he said, it's basically like a weakness. And we already know that about the weakness, but he explained it in a way where he said, it's almost like having a target on your back as a weakness, where you make yourself vulnerable and it's like a weakening of the defenses, essentially. And this is what we have bred into men from a generational, cultural, societal standpoint for years. And it's now starting to shift a little bit, but talking about even something like men's mental health is popular in theory until you actually start having real conversations with people about it. And I know people online who have started to present some of their opinions around men's mental health from the standpoint of being supportive of it. And they started getting death threats. And women were saying, oh, we need to make these statistics higher. I can reference a very specific, large Instagram account where some of these comments were being posted very publicly. And they were talking about the male suicide rate being so high. And there were people in the comment section talking about how, oh, we need to make it 100% instead of 75. And that level of not only a lack of compassion and there's some hate in there and bitterness and all of those things. I get where I guess that's coming from, but how can you call yourself a human and treat your fellow human that way? I don't care who they are or what color they are. We can't approach things that way. And the more women I speak to about some of these issues with men and providing more nuanced understanding of men and why they maybe show up a particular way, why they may, it may feel like to the women that they're being hurt by men or something like that. I am not excusing anyone's behavior. Again, I don't care who you are. You have to own your shit. You have to take responsibility for yourself. And you have to do whatever you can to show up in the world as the best version of yourself that you can be for everyone's sake, because we're all connected. But when we can bring more understanding to this, some of the women have actually been coming back to me and saying, wow, it makes me want to give men a lot more grace as I understand more of who they are and how they have been raised and the expectations that the world places on them. And that to me is incredibly gratifying to hear, because then that will hopefully open the door to more conversations and curiosity, as opposed to making assumptions when somebody shows up a particular way, especially a man, as opposed to jumping to the conclusion of, oh, he must be showing up this way because he's an asshole, or whatever the immediate reason is that goes on in our heads. Instead, asking why and how did you end up this way? How did you approach this decision? What went through your head when you came to this decision to show up this particular way? Whatever it is, like, start asking questions, and without the the judgment attached to it. Because you can show up with curiosity dripping with judgment. That's not going to be useful. We have to create more openings and ask questions where people feel safe enough to be able to open. And a lot of men, in my personal and professional experience, do not necessarily feel safe enough to open, because sometimes when they have in the past, it has been either used against them or told that that wasn't a real reason. Or maybe when they were a kid, it was, like, man up. Don't be such a pussy. Like, there are all of these things, like be man enough. There's all these cultural philosophies that we have adopted and just accepted as okay. And then we're looking at men wondering, like, pointing the finger at men and very quick to blame men for a wide variety of different problems without ever really offering them real support or asking the questions as to how we can change some of these systemic issues on a larger scale.
Yeah, I mean, I just keep coming back to the fact that the problem is that this is what we do. We should not be talking about men and women. We should we should not be talking about black and white. We should be talking about humans. What we do is we treat people as political abstractions. We treat people as gender abstractions. We treat people as race abstractions. And so from my perspective, I don't even like getting into the discussion about men are struggling this way. Because what that does is it brings up women are struggling this way. You go, well, blacks are struggling this way. And what it brings up is, well, whites are struggling this way. The fact of the matter is, if this brings up this idea, if women are struggling, then the culture is struggling. Team human is struggling. If men are struggling, then the culture, team human, is struggling. And if black people are struggling, people of color are struggling, then white people and the rest of culture is struggling. And this is what people don't understand. So I don't even really like to have the conversation of this back and forth about women are struggling this way and men are struggling this way. I just go, we are humans and we suffer. And the fact that we can't see that just because someone happens to be a man is absolutely terrifying to me, really. And I'll throw something else out here for all of us who are listening to this conversation. And to me, it is hard. Look, the bottom line is we humans like things to be the way they are. We have these beliefs that society is solid because of certain things, whatever they might be. And there's a certain subset of our society that thinks family, male, female dynamic, family dynamics, all of that is what a family is. And I just go, my opinion, just try this on, everybody. You don't have to agree with me, but my opinion is this. We are one family and humanity is evolving. We are evolving. And if you look close at how we are evolving, you're starting to see, right, that there used to be a thing where races didn't mix, at least in America. Now you see lots of interracial couples. Now you see more and more people who don't have the same problems. And you look at them, you can't even tell. Are they black? Are they white? Are they, part Asian? Whatever. We're starting, and this is going to begin to be even more. Take that out 100 years, 200 years. You're going to start seeing everyone is starting to look like one race, which I think is a beautiful thing. And a lot of people, I think, can go, yeah, Jay, that's a beautiful thought. But they also don't understand this. To me, I go, let's take gender, too. Also, we're evolving in this way. Many people are wanting to express gender in different ways. There are some women who have more masculine tendencies, despite being cis hetero, than some cis hetero men. And we know this. We can see this sort of gradation here. And instead, we want to continue to go, no. Stop evolving into this one race thing. We have to be black and white. Or no. Stop, this gender sort of thing. We have to be one gender or another. And for me, and I'm saying, I know these are hard questions. And I know that a lot of men and a lot of women are trying to resist this. And I just go, sorry, but this is where it's going. I don't care what your thought on it is. This is where it's going. I don't care if you're scared of globalism. That's where it's going. I don't care if you're scared of race mixing. That's where it's going. I don't care if you're worried about gender mixing. That is actually what is happening. And from my perspective, I go, this is human evolution. Why do we humans continue to try to separate ourselves constantly? It's from a spiritual perspective. And by the way, this is a big pet peeve of mine. From a spiritual perspective, to me, spiritual at its very basic level is simply an acknowledgement that you are me, I am you, and all of you listening, we are them. We are one family. We are extensions of, for lack of a better word, one consciousness in a sense. And so to me, I go, until we start understanding that and stop othering people, and othering people is going, that's a man, he's this particular way. If you're doing that, I get it. I 100% get it. And you probably have some really good reasons. Some people have some very good reasons. They've been traumatized by men. But what you don't understand is that if you other all men, what you are doing is you are destroying yourself in the process. You're destroying the growth of humanity. Men need to be embraced and held the same way women need to be embraced and held. People need to have their suffering acknowledged, whether they are male or female, black or white or whatever. So from my perspective, I think we get into trouble, and even you and I do it, right? We get into trouble a lot of times when we continue to talk about male, female, instead of just going human. Now, obviously, there are some issues and generalizations we can apply to male and female. Certainly, I have studied for most of my career the differences in biology, which are very real between male and female. But the fact that they're not hard black and white lines, there is a large continuum here. And so from my perspective, that's the one thing I would say. I would say that is actually the problem, because I'm more about the root cause of the problem. I'm like, how do we get to the root cause of the problem? What is the root cause of the problem? The root cause of the problem at its very core to me is the illusion that we are separate, that women are somehow better or worse, different than men, who are better or worse, different than women. Instead of being like, men and women are two sides of the same coin. They cannot exist one without the other. They are 1,000% dependent on each other like any ecosystem. One goes down, the other suffers. Plain and simple. And society suffered at a time where women were suppressed. Think about any ecosystem. The more diverse the ecosystem is, the healthier it is. Society suffered greatly as a result of that. Why would we want to repeat that by flipping the script? And I will say this is the one thing that I'll say that I think is amazing. I do believe in humans, and I think it's amazing. I think most people of color do not want to other white people. I think most women who are cis hetero women do not want to other men. They get what I'm saying. What we're falling prey to is the extremes on either side who dominate the conversation, when most of us go, of course we want to love men and care for men and acknowledge men and take care of them and build them up, while we also love women, acknowledge women, take care of women and build them up so we can all thrive. This to me is, at its core. Now we can certainly talk about what men tend to suffer with. I'll give you a couple examples of this that I feel like are perhaps things. I mean, again, it's a gross generalization because it's hard. You can't just put all men into, but I do think what men struggle with is men come up in the dominant cultural zeitgeist, the way that we see things in culture. They have to win. They have to be seen as someone who is doing something of value, is making money, is winning in some way. So it makes sense that if that's what our culture has fed into, that you're not worthy unless X, Y, and Z, then of course men are going to be like, well, I've been told by culture I got to be strong, so I'll fight and I'll contribute to violence. I've been told by culture I've got to have power and money, so I will manipulate to get money. I'll do whatever I can to get money. Instead of saying your only job here as a male is to find and work your purpose potential. Find your unique place in the ecosystem and show up for Team Human in that place. Whether that is being a janitor at a high school, whether that is being a farmer to grow crops, whether that is being a doctor in a hospital, whether that is just being, someone who checks on their neighbors and looks after the neighborhood, whatever that might be. And same goes for women. And so I think that's where men struggle, because on the one hand, just like, women used to be like, I want to be an artist, I want to be a scientist, and culture held them back. A lot of men are dealing with this same thing where they're like, I don't want to have to fight this battle that I don't even know the rules to. And I've got to, win and be strong and, make money and do all these things. And it feels impossible. So I don't know if that resonates with you. I do think like we just have to stop with the othering of you're a male, therefore you're X. You're a female, therefore you're Y. You're a person of color, therefore you're Z, right? And this is what we do. And this to me is the root of all destructive policy, all destructive things that happen in humanity. And we are responsible for it. We are the ones responsible for it.
And yet there is, in any evolution like this, there is going to be crossover phase. So let's say that you're right. And I do agree with you, especially in the sense of like the evolution that humanity is undergoing, and the fact that really like we are all connected in ways that we can't even fully comprehend consciously. And there is so much there that we are just starting to scratch the surface on. There's like this collective shift happening where this is very slowly moving into something very different. The way that we approach humanity and the way that we view humanity. I do think though that there's always going to be this crossover period where we have to address these, I don't want to call them outlier groups because it's not outlier groups, but we have to address these more core underlying issues to shine a spotlight in the areas where there are shadows, to be able to create more equal ground for the groups of people that are suffering, to try and I'm almost picturing like buckets of water that are all out of balance. They all have different levels of water, and trying to bring each bucket up to the point where everyone is a little bit more balanced. And that is going to require more attention spent on a variety of different areas and for different people to get everyone to this point of equality. But what does equality mean to different people? And this, I think, is one of the issues that a lot of people are struggling with as well, is because women in particular can talk about shattering the glass ceiling, but what about falling through the glass floor? So the men often don't have the same social supports in place, and not to other it again, but just for the sake of argument, they don't have the same social supports in place, which is how so many men end up, for example, on the street or homeless. And women have more social supports overall, more people that they can probably like fall back on, or not everyone. I'm not saying everyone, I'm speaking generally here, but there is some of that in place. And men often feel that they can't go to anyone, or that they don't have anyone, or that they're not comfortable being vulnerable enough asking for help, even when people would gladly help them out. And these are issues that we all play a role with. I'm probably going to get in trouble for saying this too, but a lot of times when women say to me, if they're complaining about men as a gender or whatever, and I'll point out to them, who raised these men? Who raised these men? Statistically speaking, there are, and I don't have the statistics in front of me, but there are an enormous number of households that are single parent households, mostly run by women. That is problematic for a wide variety of issues, many, many issues. But then don't be so quick to point the finger again. When we point one finger, there's always three more pointing back at us. And we have to take responsibility for that too, and ownership for that. And the fact that we all are playing a part in this. Everyone is playing a part in this. And if we don't all start to take some responsibility and to show more compassion in these areas, things will remain the same.
Let me interrupt the show just for a few minutes because I want to tell you about one of our sponsors, Evolve Telemed. One of the questions I get all of the time, one of the services that you are asking me for constantly, is hormone replacement therapy. Women going through menopause, women going through perimenopause, women in postmenopause, women under stressful situations who are dealing with low sex hormone levels, estrogen and progesterone, are constantly asking me about progesterone therapy or estrogen and progesterone therapy. And men, same thing, constantly asking me about testosterone replacement therapy. Plenty of you, many of you, always asking, Jade, can you prescribe me hormones? I need testosterone if you're a man, or I need estrogen and progesterone or testosterone if you're a woman. And I always have to say that I am no longer seeing patients in this way because my educational duties are keeping me so busy. And this is where Evolve Telemed comes in. I have been looking for a company that does bioidentical hormone replacement therapy, and that is critically important. If you're going to be doing HRT or TRT, HRT being hormone replacement therapy for women, TRT being testosterone replacement therapy for men, if you are going to do these therapies, you want the bioidentical hormones. You want the hormones that your body makes naturally, that your body can recognize, that is no different from the hormones your body would make if you were making adequate levels. Bioidentical hormone replacement therapy does just this. And Evolve Telemed is a company that I am now using for my own testosterone replacement needs and have been super impressed with the way that they have structured their business model. And so I am now bringing this service to you through my partnership with Evolve Telemed. Essentially, the way this works is you go online, you make an appointment with Evolve. Evolve gets a doctor with you on a Zoom call. They go through your whole case. They go through your blood labs. They then prescribe your hormones directly to you, and you can get those hormones wherever you are. You do not have to go to a clinic near you. All you need is to have an internet access point, and you can meet with an expert in bioidentical hormone replacement therapy and get those prescriptions. Now you can see why this is so powerful, can't you? Because this is something that so many of us need and can benefit from for our aging needs, our sexual health needs. These things have profound impact on mood, hair, skin, erections, libido, you name it. These things do everything for our metabolic health and vitality. So I am incredibly excited to bring Evolve Telemed to you. Now, the link that you go to is drjade.com/hormones. drjade.com/hormones. This will bring you to the Evolve Telemed portal. If you use the code Next Level, you will get a discount on checkout for your first patient visit. I'm very excited to be able to bring this to you, and I hope you will use Evolve Telemed. I know you're going to find it extremely powerful to move your hormone needs over to them. Check them out, Evolve Telemed. Use the link drjade.com/hormones. drjade.com/hormones for Evolve Telemed. And let's get back to the show.
Yeah, well, this argument that you're making is a very popular conservative argument, meaning that the degradation of the family is the problem. And who knows where that started, right? Like, I don't know exactly. And this is another argument I think that conservatives might make. No one necessarily knows where this started. It is the reality. And even if we did know where it started, right? Even if we go back and we go, oh, in history, we can pinpoint it right here. And it was this group of people. But now we're 200 years ahead and none of those group of people are around or alive. It doesn't help us to blame those groups of people. What helps us to just go, what are we going to do to solve this issue? And it brings me back, and I won't harp on it again and again, but it just brings me back to that. I go, it's not that there's bad fathers and there's bad mothers. And I won't even say that it's because they're bad people. I'm going to say it's because our nature, we still have not figured out that it's not eye for an eye. And it's not this idea of I'll help you if you help me. It's this idea that if they fall, we fall. And if we fall, they fall. And somebody somewhere has to step up and take one on the chin for society and say, I am going to be the one that stops othering people, that treats women not as women, but as humans,
who have dreams and potential, and I want to see them reach those potential, and treats men as humans who have dreams and potential, and I want to see them reach those potential. And I'm going to take ownership for myself, and I'm going to be the antidote to asshole. I think honestly, when it comes to men, and I think this is again now the liberal argument, or perhaps, or maybe the conservative argument, I don't know, but like I think when it comes to men, this is on us to a large degree as well. Like, here's what bothers me about this. I don't like the idea of and some of you listening might just be like, oh, well, this is a typical guy thing, and that's okay. Let's have the discussion and let's have all the judgments. But I don't like the victim way of approaching this, okay? I don't like being like, oh, woe is me, men are in trouble. I also don't like it's like, oh, woe is me, women are in trouble. And I don't necessarily like, oh, woe is me, people of color are in trouble. I look at it like we are all in trouble if one of them are in trouble, right? Like this is how come this whole argument with Black lives, all lives, this thing that happened in the United States. You're a Canuck, so but you remember this. You guys followed this, right?
Oh yeah, trust me, it affects us too.
So to me, I go, Black lives matter. Yes, duh. All lives matter. Yes, duh. Why are we even having this thing? Now, here's the thing that I think you're bringing up. So let's just address it. What you're bringing up is you're essentially saying if there's a certain group of people who are struggling more than others in certain areas, in this case, men, in the case of all lives, Black lives, the argument is Black lives are struggling more. And I would say in that argument, Black lives, all lives, maybe I'm wrong, but I would say, yes, Black lives are struggling more. That is a group that as a whole, so I'm not saying don't look at people as groups at all. I'm saying the groups are made up of individuals. So look at the individual first. Then you go, if more individuals in a particular category are struggling, we need to help them. And that is all lives matter, right? That is all lives matter. Now with men, if men are struggling in a particular area, we need to help them. We can't say, well, they're just men. Then we need to understand how are they struggling. And it has nothing to do with how we're helping women and how women are struggling. That's the problem. This is what people do. Why should we help men when women are struggling? Because men are struggling in these particular areas where women, I think, are struggling still. And we have to put support is in pay gap, in equality in the workplace, in certain things like that. By the way, I'm for equality. I'm not for equity. For those of you who don't know, that argument is sort of like I'm for equality of opportunity. Everyone should have an equal opportunity. I am not for the idea that we have to have, a certain amount of women in every field and a certain amount of men in every field. Some men don't want to be nurses, and some women don't want to be, I don't know, rocket scientists. This is just that to me is silly. It should be based on who wants it, bad enough. It's funny enough, you and I were just today talking about Joan of Arc. And to me, this is a woman in the 1430s who basically led a French army at a time where that would never happen. And from my perspective, like this kind of stuff can happen if someone wants it bad enough, but we shouldn't necessarily put any obstacles in the way of that, or necessarily give certain people ladders and other people not. We should just, the way I look at it is like this. Let's use another analogy. Let's say we're all running a marathon, right? And all of humanity is running this marathon. And we all have to run this race. And we all start at the same place and we end at the same place, right? We're born and we die. From my perspective, what culture likes to do is it likes to look and go, there's people running with red shirts on. Let's erect some boundaries for them, or let's make sure they don't get the best tennis shoes, or let's try to, when they run by, let's, try to, I don't know, throw rocks at them or get in their way or distract them in some way. And other people will let them just run the race. And what I'm trying to say here is you don't put any obstacles in anyone's way. You also don't try to give anyone any unfair advantage. You let people run on their own merits. And in a sense, this is how I look at this male, sort of issue. What you have to essentially do is go, are there areas where there are obstacles, conscious or unconscious, known or unknown, either they were put there on purpose or not, that men are struggling with. And if there are, then we should do everything we can to support that in a way to help people live their best purpose potentials without any thought about that they're male or female or anything like that. These are just people struggling. And I think we should do the same thing with women. I think we should do the same thing with people of color. I think we should, across the board, don't put obstacles in anyone's way. And also, don't play this game, because it's an ecosystem. People need to find their natural places, their natural their natural way in the world to do what they're meant to do in this place. We should not interfere with that. In a sense, I don't know, there's a place, forget where it was, maybe it's Canada, where they introduced wolves back into the environment for the first time. Maybe it was Yellowstone or something like that. What they found is within about 5 years, the ecosystem was thriving much greater than it was before the wolves were taken out. And so what I think a lot of people do is they go, oh, men are being destructive. Men are being this and this. Let's take them out. And what they do is they hurt the ecosystem. In the same way they hurt the ecosystem where they were like, women are their places in the home. They don't have anything to offer science or engineering or any of these things. When of course they did, and they have. And once we opened took the obstacles away from women, society got better. Now, what do we think we're doing by now putting obstacles in place for men, or at least not letting them crumble and not creating, letting them thrive? It just hurts. It just hurts the ecosystem.
Yeah. Everyone suffers across the board when that takes place. We really need to start taking a look at the different aspects of this and really going inward to better understand the deeply held beliefs and stories that each one of us is carrying with us that are not necessarily anything that we consciously created, but what was given to us either by parents, society, culture, whatever that is. These stories that we hang on to that are really damaging when we start to look at people through a particular lens. And this could be argued for anything. This is not just about men. This could be argued for absolutely anything. Getting really clear on noticing our own biases coming up, and even your own personal experiences that may influence how you view certain humans. Jade, you just said to me last night that you commented on the fact that I have every reason to dislike men.
I was just going to bring this up. Absolutely. And why don't you tell the listeners why? Because I was just going to say, I was going to ask you the question. I was going to be like, you know what? Honestly, why do you love men so much? Like, why are you such a male advocate? Because from my perspective, you have all the reason in the world, some pretty horrific reasons, in my opinion, to not like men at all. You have been wounded by men over and over again in your life. So why the love for men? This, I think, makes you actually extraordinary. I think you're a person who's taking it on the chin. You basically have been like, here's. Can I answer it first? And I want you to answer.
Yeah, do it. Go ahead.
I don't know, by the way, but like to me, I go, here's how it seems to me. There's two types of people in the world. They're hurt by something or someone. They end up hating that thing or that something, that someone, and they then make it their life's mission to hate them and or hurt them back. And from my perspective, you were hurt by something or someone, and somehow you went, I see that they're the wounded one somehow. That they're the ones who struggle. They're treating me this way because they've struggled in some way, and I want to help them. Mm-hmm. That to me is extraordinary, and I would like to know why. Because to me, I go, that's a next level human, someone who takes their hurt to help. A base level human is someone who takes their hurt and hurts.
Yeah. It's. I won't go into like the details of some of my male trauma. You can listen to some of our previous episodes if you want some of the backstory. But like father trauma, a partner who cheated for almost a decade. There's a lot there, and we were actually just talking about this again last night too. That my 9-year relationship, the night that I found out everything that had been going on. I was incredibly calm, and I wasn't even angry with him, which actually shocked me. I think even more than it shocked him. I was shocked that I was not angry. And of course I had moments of anger in the months that followed as I was trying to pull the pieces of myself back together. But I think that there was an innate both acceptance of the situation and that I am intended to do something with this. I even stated that out loud to him the night that I found out. And that there was also this recognition that there was greater things at play here, that he, and this is just one example, but that he had this void within him that he had felt the need to fill. And there are a wide variety of reasons. We're not going to turn this all into cheating because we've talked about that before. But again, I recognized it from a more macro approach. That is one of my gifts, is that I can zoom out of a situation, even in intense trauma. I can zoom out to take a look at the bigger picture and almost see how it's going to play out and the lessons that I will be able to pull from it as time moves forward and I am able to heal. And then I go back into the actual feeling it out, because that's the necessary step. We can't skip over that. And what I recognized right away was how much I could see that he had suffered to get to the point of behaving this way. Because I don't think that is who he is at his core. And any of the men who have wounded me in my life, I recognize so clearly that this is not, I'm not excusing their behavior. No one is excusing their behavior. They still have to all own it. But that there are other factors at play here that contribute to the way that we show up in the world. We still have to take responsibility and ownership. We all have choices to make. We all have to own our choices. You can decide to do something better with it, or you can allow it to fuel you to hurt others. That is your decision. You get to make, you have agency over that. But when it comes to being so supportive of men, I just recognized that men are so deeply undersupported and had so much compassion and wanting to get curious about why men were showing up this way. Like, what has happened to you? What beliefs have been pushed on you that were not even your own, that you have not created for you? What expectations do you battle with every single day that you think that you have to live up to in order to even be considered a man? And when any man falls outside of the stereotypes that have been created, they are considered less than as a human. And we just don't, when we view it that way, it has to change something in you. I almost don't know, like there is someone, I run a men's group, and I have had more people reach out to me about the men's group saying that they get almost emotional sometimes watching me launch it. And there was one female friend of mine where she said, "You are the only woman I know who can look me dead in the eye and tell me with such true honesty, to the point where I really believe you, that not only are there good men in the world, there are so many good men in the world." And she said, "You are the only woman I know who can look me in the eye and tell me that. And I believe you."
Yeah.
Because you have to be able to spot the good in people. That does not mean staying in shitty relationships because you see the potential. So there are very clear lines here. Like, you have to have boundaries around this. You still have to be protective of yourself a little bit, like showing up in a beautiful way and letting the chips fall, but not letting yourself be walked all over either. There are boundaries and stuff that need to happen here. But when you look for the good in people, and you recognize those qualities in them, and this applies to anybody, and you allow those qualities to bloom by communicating to them that you recognize it and complimenting them even. Men are starved for compliments. Starved. There are men that I know who, if they get one compliment 16 years ago, they will still remember it to this day, because they literally do not get complimented the same way that women do. And it's things like that. When you recognize someone, a beautiful quality about somebody, tell them, like, communicate that to them. We've talked about this too, that I always tell past lovers of mine, even after I've ended things with them, I will sometimes even write them a handwritten note. I've been known to send a handwritten note, letting them know all of the beautiful qualities that I recognize in them, even if they hurt me, even if even if they maybe didn't so-called deserve to have that pointed out to them, because my soul still recognized those beautiful qualities in them. And that did not happen by accident. And just because I didn't necessarily get to experience the fullness of those qualities that I see in them, that doesn't mean that they don't possess those qualities. And I would rather that they know about it and hopefully be able to then maybe have a light bulb moment of their own, or feel that sense of recognition and that sense of being seen, that allows the fertile ground for those qualities to grow. It's like nourishing the very soil that those qualities exist in and allowing them to bloom. But when we just instead move through the world focused on our own hurts, that is not love. That is not love. You cannot call it love when you have placed expectations of reciprocation and acknowledgement on those qualities, or on the way that you show up for other people. You show up for other people the way that you feel proud of showing up in, and with the compassion and love. And I'm not telling anyone that that will come back to you from that direct person, but it will come back to you tenfold. You will still receive that love in one form or another. That might not be the right person to receive it from, but are you really going to walk through life regretting that you told someone that they had beautiful qualities because they hurt you? I won't.
Yeah, what you're doing there is you're being the spiritual antidote. You're essentially recognizing on some level, whether conscious or unconscious, that you have a choice, and that you can either go, there's several different ways to look at this, right? You can be like, you hurt me, I hate you. Mm-hmm. You can hurt me, I don't care. I'm not going to hate you, but I don't want nothing to do with you. And you're going one step further and saying, you hurt me, and I'm going to give you an example of what it's like to love someone, because maybe you've never had that example, perhaps. And to me, this is a really interesting piece here, because many of us listening can be like, and I know certainly what I'm thinking, what you'd be thinking, and what most of the listeners think. Yeah, but what about the real devious, dangerous asshole? Like that really, what about them? And I go, the interesting thing is you can't police that. And what is more likely? Do you think calling them a devious, dangerous asshole is going to make them less a devious, dangerous asshole? Or do you think telling them they have good qualities may have more of a potential to make them a devious, dangerous asshole? Now, I don't necessarily know that either approach is going to make a difference, but I'll put my money on the other one having the potential to change the course of this devious, dangerous asshole's way of being. Certainly calling someone a devious, dangerous asshole, my money is not on that approach.
And this is why I actively refuse to use the term narcissist. Because first of all, that terminology is being thrown around way too much.
Well, it's weaponized, and people like to weaponize it because they like to go, I was hurt and I don't understand what happened here, and therefore I can just dismiss it by calling you a toxic human or a narcissist.
Exactly.
And sometimes you're right, by the way, but most of the time it's far more nuanced than that.
It is, because a lot of times we are trying to explain to ourselves and to potentially other people in our lives why we ended up with someone who maybe treated us so badly. So rather than take the ownership of it and go internally to look at our own wounding and how we can heal ourselves or to grow or any of those things, we are very quick to point the finger at somebody else. And it doesn't make sense to me, because first of all, if someone is an actual diagnosable, it is not my job to diagnose anyone with anything. And even if it was our jobs to diagnose people, calling someone a narcissist who is potentially an actually diagnosable narcissist, if they are a true narcissist, that's going to bounce right off of them. That's not going to do anything to them. It's not going to hurt them. They're not even probably going to even really notice, and they're certainly not going to seek help for it. So what is the point?
And by the way, anyone who studies this stuff or understands psychology understands we all are narcissists.
Yes. We all have those qualities.
This is a continuum. And in fact, if you have somebody, we all need to have enough narcissism in us to believe in ourselves.
Yes.
It's just that if we let that go too far. So we need to be narcissistic enough to know that we're capable and feel powerful. And we also need to be insecure and modest enough to know we're not that damn special. And most people healthily find that range. And
a true narcissist does not. But my point is this, is that to me, why get caught up on the dangerous, devious assholes in the world? Move on, put up boundaries, go on to the next one, and don't. This is the thing that I use this quote a lot lately. It's one of my favorites. And I thought it was by Ben Offer, but I cannot find this quote. But it goes, the purpose of evil is not to hurt you. The purpose of evil is to make you do more evil. So when you are in a relationship with a man who's a devious, dangerous asshole, and you get out of that relationship with that man and then move into your next relationship with a man, or see your girlfriend in a relationship with a man and then paint that particular man in the same colors as the man who was the devious, dangerous asshole, you have now become the devious, dangerous asshole, in my opinion. You have actually passed on the evil that was perpetrated on you, which by definition is evil, if you look at this quote this way. So I think this is ultimately what we're up against. As next level humans, aspiring, people who want to make the world better, we have to be the ones to take it on the chin. And I guess to wrap up this particular conversation, I want to ask you a couple questions, and then maybe I can, I'll answer it as well. But so here's the thing. So then two questions here. One, what do you think are the major struggles of men? And then I go, because you're so gracious with men and forgiving for men, at what point do you just go, fuck this dude, this guy is an absolute horror story, a dangerous person, not a good human, not someone, he's a man. Like, at what point? And because look, let's all be honest as we're having this conversation, those people exist. So those two questions, I'm curious.
So the first one was what are some of the biggest struggles with men? Yeah. I think,
in your opinion as a woman, because you'll see it different than I might see it as a man. And of course, we'll see it different because of our context. We're both, you're from Canada, you're a white woman, I'm a white man from the United States. Like, if we had a whole group of people, and it'd be perhaps near infinite ways of seeing it. I'm just curious how you see it from the context of someone who's studied this deeply, your own personal experience, and having many conversations with women. I would like to know, and I'm sure a lot, the men listening to this would like to know, how do you see it? What do you think the real struggles are for men? And then I would like to know, when you're dealing with a really dysfunctional, destructive, dangerous man, perhaps, any of those variations, how do you deal with that? How are we supposed to deal with that?
I think that and this is from both personal and professional experience, one of the struggles that I have seen from men is that, and this presents a lot of different issues from a lot of different angles, is that men truly are fixers. I'm speaking generally here. I'm sure there are some who aren't, but very generally speaking, men are fixers. So when women go to men that they're in a relationship with and they are venting about something, I hear about this more times than I can count, where they go to their male partner, and they're just venting about something, and the male immediately tries to offer a solution, and then the woman gets really pissed off, and I'm like, okay. You have to understand where he's coming from. I said, first of all, it's up to you to communicate your needs. So if you want to just vent, you need to explain that to him. Let him know you are not looking for solutions right now. You just need to vent. And if you communicate that to him, he will probably be totally fine with it. So give him that chance, as opposed to just assuming that he should already know better. Tell him what you need. That goes both ways, but just for the sake of this argument. And then I said, you also need to understand that the deep-seated need where that is coming from is that men want to move mountains for you. They want to move mountains for you. They want to make sure that you feel safe, secure, protected, that they are able to provide for you. Again, I'm not saying that that it's right necessarily, that these are the stereotypes that men seem to operate off of culturally, because I think it can also be damaging to them. But there are really beautiful qualities threaded into that they want to move a mountain for you. Let them. Sometimes you have to let them. So but I think that can be a really big issue when men also will enter relationships, in particular, with sort of the nice guy syndrome, the going along to get along, the going with the flow, not wanting to start, not wanting to communicate, and not having necessarily the same practice or skills at communicating, because we quite literally raise women differently in this regard. Women have a lot more opportunity to practice this. And I've talked to so many men who say, I don't even want to communicate sometimes with my partner because I know that it will start a fight and that she will beat me in the verbal argument every time. And I'll feel like I wasn't even able to get my point across. So it's actually just easier because I'd rather not cause an issue and cause a disagreement. So I just let it go. And I think that communication can end up being a really big issue for a lot of men. The men who maybe don't know what they need, or they maybe have an inkling as to what they need, but they don't know how to communicate it, how to get it across. And just like any other human being, men struggle with the same issues that all of us do in terms of fear of rejection, abandonment, some of those really core issues that can present and show up in relationships. So I think that when it comes to, and I could go on all day about the number of things, I also strongly believe that men need other men. And I say that as a woman running a men's group. Men still need other men. And in my men's group, I am very intentional about having them connect with each other outside of the group even. That's part of their homework, because they need other men. They can not only, just have women, just like women need other women. It is interconnected. We all need each other for different reasons and in different ways. And so many men feel like they don't even have a guy friend to reach out to. When you ask a lot of men if they have anyone in their life that they could or who they have in their life that they could call if they're having a hard time, the vast majority of men say no one.
There's no question about that.
They have no one.
Yep.
They have no one. And that in and of itself is one of the most heartbreaking things that I could ever hear, because as humans, we need other humans in 100%. So many different ways and for so many different reasons.
I would actually argue that's why that statistic right there, which I think is, I don't know all the reasons, but I think that is why men die at a much younger
100%.
age. And it's why they commit suicide more. It's why they commit more violence. It's why this is the reason.
Is at the root.
Because they are disconnected from the ecosystem. Now, sometimes voluntarily so, but most times they don't know how it even happened or even aware of it. And this is a cultural problem caused by men and women and all of us.
Yep. Again, we all play a role. And when it comes to, and then I want to hear what you think the biggest thing is that men struggle with, but when it comes to when does it become destructive? Like when does it cross a line? There are always going to be times in our life in a wide variety of different situations where you have to know yourself. You have to know your own values. You have to know the code of honor and ethics and morality that you choose to live by, the standard to which you hold yourself, and who you want to be as a human. And when you are in an environment, physical, geographical, or with other people who are impacting you in a really negative way, and you have communicated with them, you have set the boundaries, you have done all of the things. You haven't just bolted out the door without telling anyone your needs. You have taken the active steps, and you are still running into these behaviors that are quite damaging to you. That is on you to walk out the door. Or to, at the very least, set stronger boundaries, create some sort of separation, again, emotionally, psychologically, physically, whatever that involves, or to seek the help that you need, depending on the situation. If we're talking about an abusive situation, then please, hopefully you have someone or an entity, like an organization that you can reach out to for help with that. But whatever you can do to find ways to create distance there. Like I have some of the men in my past, one in particular that was very damaging for me. I have an enormous amount of compassion for him, and he knows it. He is very aware of it. I would run into him. If I ran into him on the street, I would have a very kind conversation with him, but he is not in my life anymore because he would be damaging for me. And I have no interest. And quite frankly, I probably wouldn't be great for him either. Like, I don't think that it would be beneficial for either party. So sometimes you have to make those decisions as a form of self-protection. You still have to go within and go, what am I willing to tolerate? And what feels good to me and what doesn't.
Yeah.
And sometimes we have to go through some shitty experiences to better understand where those boundaries need to be drawn, because we don't know what we don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, I would say, in terms of the first part of the question, what do men struggle with? To me, it's very clearly power. They have a very tenuous relationship with power, and I'll just go through this really quickly. But to me, in my model, the next level human model, base level humans crave safety and security, and in order to allay that, they chase power. If they have power, they feel safe. I think women, in general, because I don't think it's a good idea to talk about men and women. I think it's better to talk about humans. But I think in general, women are a little bit more on the belonging and acceptance side of things. And so they have a little bit more of a craving for popularity, a more cultured level, sort of a thing here. And I think this plays out very clearly in our society in terms of the way women and men have largely been raised. Now, this problem with power, what everyone really wants is that there's no problem with power and popularity if it is in service of purpose, which is the next level human sort of way of looking at it. Why am I here? How can I make a difference and matter? That, I believe, is what all of us want. We lose sight of that, and men, I think, frequently lose sight of that and become power seekers. And once they become power seekers, it can get very destructive from there. And here's the interesting thing to me is, by the way, if you're going to complain about men and their power-seeking behavior, then you should look at yourself and see where you're rewarding power-seeking behavior in men over purpose-seeking behavior in men. For example, if you have a man who's like, I love what I do. I just want to work as a mechanic. I don't care. That's what I love to do. I feel like I'm good with my hands. And you're thinking he's not working up to his potential because he needs to be XYZ. What you just did is fell into the power struggle that he himself is dealing with. And a lot of people do this to men. And then what happens is, in that power struggle, if men feel like they have no purpose or even aware of it, lots of destructive things can happen in the search for power. Either they go, I'm not powerful, therefore I'm worthless, and therefore they feel depressed, they kill themselves, they do everything else, or they act out in very violent ways. And I think this is why you see it's mostly men shooting up schools and stuff like that, because of this power thing. They want power over something, and they've somehow got it wrong, that it's not power in itself that they're seeking, it's power in service of purpose. This, to me, is the major dysfunction of men. They get this wrong. They get it wrong every time. And we as a culture reward men who are power seekers above purpose seekers. We reward men, that are powerful. And then we turn around and say, why are you so dysfunctional? And we don't even look at ourselves being like, we've created our whole thing that men are supposed to be powerful. So what do you expect them to do when they don't know what purpose is and they're just chasing power? They're going to be sick. They're going to be depressed. They're going to commit suicide. They're going to lash out. They're going to do stuff that's not necessarily in their best nature. And partly, this is, for me, I go, we as a society and we as individuals need to take some ownership of perpetuating that. Mm-hmm. Now, on the other side of things, if we have a man who's lashing out in this way, it's we have to do everything we can to see people as their best level human selves. All we can do on the one hand is go, I will stop this behavior. I will stop seeing men as all bad or all good or I'll see men as humans. And I'll stop seeing women as all good or all bad. I'll see women and I'll start treating people according to the law of humanity, which says I'm going to try to treat you in terms of your best nature. And if you insist on making the choices again and again to be destructive, then I will punish you by not being around you and getting you out of my life and getting you away from people that you're damaging, and or culture will punish you for that. And I do think that's the way we handle it. But you have to also look at what's the underlying problem. The underlying problem is that, in my opinion, it is this power problem that men fall mostly susceptible to. By the way, I do think women fall mostly susceptible to the popularity problem. They want, they want this group thing, that sort of happens. The stereotypical thing would be the liberal female who wants to attack other groups that they see as destructive to themselves or other people who have been marginalized. Again, I can understand that, but what you're doing is you're fighting the battle with the same tools that you are complaining about and therefore becoming what you hate in the process. And instead, you need to relinquish popularity and this need for connection and belonging for purpose to be like, what is it that I am here to bring that benefits all of us, not just this particular group, that benefits the ecosystem? For me, that's what we all need to focus on. And that's what I would say is the major issue for men.
Yeah. Yeah. The power and purpose part, I think, is really important because I definitely see that play out. And that's why there's this whole culture built around, like getting the money, like you were talking about earlier, like getting the money, the success, getting all of these very sort of stereotypical pieces put in place. But there's a sense of self-worth that is almost up on that mountaintop that I think that a lot of men feel they can't access until they hit all those things.
Well, look at it like this. Here's an example I think that might make sense to some women. Now imagine most women are very aware of the fact of how stifling it must have been for their ancestors and for a ton of modern day women that you have to stay in the house. You cannot chase your dreams. You have to take care of kids. This is your role. It is absolutely horrifying that we did this to women and had laws in place and all kinds of things in place to make that the common ground. Now imagine you're a guy who must try to win this game, build power, when all you might want to do is be out there, as a farmer or doing something with your hands or living off the land. But you have to play this game, and how stifling that can be, for people. And it's really just finding this common thing of like, we suffer as humans. We should be relating to our suffering. And when you relate to humans from their suffering, you don't see them as a male or female anymore. You see them as a common spiritual anchor point, a counterpoint that says, I have pain, you have pain, I see your pain, and we are in communion with that. I actually think, in a real sense, if there is someone, pulling the strings somewhere, maybe they used pain and empathy and the ability to tap into that as the beginning of love, which to me is spiritual connection, to be like, you are me, I am you, everything else. So why do we continue to go, why do we perpetuate the pain? Someone has got to step up and go, I will take it on the chin. I'm going to stop othering people. No more male, female, black, white, any of this stuff. No more problems with, I don't care what you do in your bedroom sexually. Just be a good human. We all suffer, right? Do what you need to do. And let's create a place where we don't put obstacles there, and we don't put, obstacles in place, and we don't give people, ladders and other people not. We just, try to say we're all on the same team here. This is what I would say is what we all need to be thinking about. But this is not a discussion, this is a discussion that we're all going to be having and watching for a long time. So I don't know if you have any final thoughts that you want to finish with.
Well, I think that everything that you just stated there about how to, I think that ultimately we need to continue to focus on alchemizing pain, because we're all going to have pain. We are all going to suffer, every single one of us. So what is most important is, how can each one of us continue to find and create, more importantly, create ways to alchemize our pain? Because every time you do that, you also teach someone else how to do the same thing without ever even saying a word. Because there is someone else in your life, I guarantee you, there is someone, even if you don't know it, who is watching you go through the thing and seeing how you come out of it. And that is impacting them and how they approach their own pain. And this ripple effect that every single one of us has the power to have. Every single one of us does have the power. It's more a matter of what kind of ripple effect do you want to create. And the more you can learn to alchemize and to work through your pain as opposed to suppressing it, pushing it aside, allowing it to fester, having it turn into contempt or resentment or, uncontrollable rage or anger or whatever. How can you learn to manage that and to turn it into the gold that becomes the entire foundation of of everything that you can grow into becoming? And each single one of us has that power from within. And we don't have to keep looking outside of ourselves for it. It lies within you. And we can have enormous ripple effects and a sense of true inner power, reclaiming that by doing your own healing work.
Yeah, it's incredibly well said. I just love this conversation. Yeah.
Love it.
All right. Well, I guess we'll wrap it there. And love you, Emily.
Love
Thank
you, Jade.